check this out. Oh, I'm moist.
I'm a huge Rob Zombie fan. From his music to his movies, whatever he's doing, you can tell he's passionate about his work. So when I heard he was writing and directing an animated movie, you better believe I was hyped for it. And then I actually watched it, and well, they warned me. I've seen this movie like 5 times at this point, and I'm really torn about how I feel about it. I really want to like this movie because it's not awful, but on the other hand, it's not that great either. And with Halloween coming around the corner, I thought now would be a perfect time to talk about it. This counts as a Halloween movie, right? There's ghouls and goblins and shit in it, so I mean probably. Definitely Halloween adjacent at least. Doesn't matter either way. My silly little channel, my silly little rules. Anyway, here's my thoughts on Rob Zombie's A Haunted World of El Superbeasto. El Superbeasto started as a comic book written by Rob Zombie, which I'll talk about a bit more in a sec, and production of the movie started in 2006 with a release scheduled for May 2007. But Zombie told animators that he couldn't split his time between two things and had to walk away, since at the same time he was working on his other movies, Devil's Rejects and Halloween. The movie originally had a $500,000 budget and was intended to be direct-to-DVD, but it expanded to a $10 million animated extravaganza, his words not mine, and had a couple screenings in theaters in America. In March 2009, he told IGN in an interview that the movie was finished, but the release was delayed due to ownership and legal issues with the company that made the movie, Stars Media, spelled with a Z, so you know they were the shits. And the animation for the movie was done by Big Star Animation and Carbuncle Cartoons, who worked on Ren and Stimpy and Ren and Stimpy Adult Party cartoon, which if you've seen kinda tracks for this movie. El Superbeasto released on DVD on September 22nd, 2009 to some pretty mixed reviews. Speaking of the DVD, I bought it like a year back, and it's gotta be one of the lamest covers out of everything I've got in my collection. Nothing to do with the actual movie, I just wanted to get it off my chest. The comic's pretty much shot for shot for the movie, or panel for panel, I don't know, with a couple of small differences. For one, the character designs are pretty different for each character. Beasto's mask is a lot more detailed, Murray the Robot and Velvet Von Black look like totally different characters, and Dr. Satan has a much better design. It's honestly a crime that they didn't keep it in the movie. The plot's more or less the same though, but Dr. Satan doesn't really have a reason to kidnap and marry Velvet other than the fact that he just wants to, and instead of Susie X having a weird side plot about fighting Nazi zombies, there's a small chapter where she fights zombie Ringos from the Beatles, which is infinitely funnier. The ending is a lot different too. Since there's no giant Dr. Satan for him to fight, there's a weird Star Trek parody which I wasn't really into.
This does not even deserve a captain's log introduction, because this is dead serious.
Overall, I think the comic was a little bit better than the movie. It's slightly funnier, and I definitely prefer the visuals a lot more. The movie takes place in Monsterland, super creative name, and follows El Superbeasto, a director, actor, and superhero, as he tries to stop Dr. Satan from taking over the world by marrying Velvet Von Black, a stripper with the mark of the devil on her ass, which will cause him to transform into a giant demon or something. I don't know, man. It's kinda silly when you really think about it. There's also a B-plot about Beasto's sister, Susie Eggs, and her robot Murray fighting Nazi zombies, which I really think takes away from the movie. Honestly, most of her scenes when she's not with Beasto kinda suck. There's a lot to like about this movie though. Paul Giamatti and Tom Kenny do great as Dr. Satan and his gorilla Otto. They really steal every scene they're in, easily the highlights of the movie. Another thing is that this is a good looking movie. It's colourful, there's no boring character design, and all the little ghouls and goblins fit into Monsterland really well. There's a lot of famous monsters here, and for the most part, they don't really feel it, they're just thrown in. For the most part though, because sure, with the OG movie monsters like the creature from the Black Lagoon and all of the various background monsters it works, when they use more modern characters like Michael Myers or characters from Rob Zombie's movies like Dr. Spaulding or Otis Driftwood, it feels like they're just in the movie for reference humor. Like, there's a scene in the movie where Beasto makes a Shining reference and then says get it, The Shining. Then it gets called a tired 80s reference. Then near the end of the movie, there's a whole scene where they rip off the movie Carrie, and they play a song about ripping off Carrie. So they make shitty lazy jokes, then point out that the jokes are shitty and lazy. There's still bad jokes. All you've established there is that you know what you're doing is bad. There's a couple of original songs in this movie which are all pretty disappointing, except the Velvet Von Black song, which other than the accompanying visuals, I think is really catchy. They do that thing where they sing about everything that's happening on screen at least 3 times, and I really hate it. I think it's just super annoying. Which brings us to the writing and jokes of the movie. Get ready for a really long tangent. I think that this movie is a perfect example of what adult animation shouldn't be, but in many cases it is. Although it's not as big as it used to be, there was that idea that cartoons made for adults had to have gratuitous violence, excessive swearing, and gross out humor. Lois wasn't lying. All you see is violence in movies and sex on TV. Now don't get me wrong, these things aren't necessarily bad if done right, but a lot of cartoons fall into the trap of thinking obscenity equals maturity. There's a weird notion that for a show to be for adults, it needs to say fuck every 5 seconds, and that way of thinking leaves you with a show like Paradise PD or Drawn Together. Just edgy humor and grossness. I feel like a lot of people saw how well South Park did when it came out despite being as vulgar as it was, and tried to strike the same goal that Trey Parker and Matt Stone did. But what they don't understand is that the language and vulgarity of South Park isn't what makes the jokes in the show land. It's just there to enhance them, and a lot of shows think they can just take the swearing and everything else without the good writing and think that'll be enough. I know I'm coming off like a real tight ass right now, but as annoying as it is, these shows aren't always bad. Sometimes it's fun to just turn your brain off and watch something like that. Like, I love Mr. Pickles, and that shows pretty much everything I just complained about. But at the same time, it's almost talking down to the viewer. They might as well just say, hey, this isn't your typical baby show. Our characters say fuck and do drugs. Isn't that crazy? But like I said, violence and swearing and even gross out humor can be fun. Sometimes even great if done properly. There's tons of great cartoons out of adult themes that are really good. Take Gendy Tartakovsky's Primal, for instance, an absolutely beautiful show both in art and writing. This show uses violence perfectly because it's not just there for the sake of it. It uses it to show how harsh surviving in a world full of prehistoric creatures would be. When you see Spear, God rest his soul, bash a mammoth's head in with a rock or absolutely destroy a T-Rex's leg, it doesn't feel gratuitous. It's needed to show the struggle to survive. Spear's literally fighting for his life every time it happens, and it shows. It also works as a good piece of visual storytelling. Since there's no real dialogue in the show, the violence sort of puts you in that world. You feel every strike, and it creates a serious sense of tension and danger. Plus, it kind of just makes sense, right? Like, he's a caveman. This is the exact type of shit he'd do. He's supposed to be, dare I say, primal. Look, man, any excuse to talk about this show and I'll take it. Another show that doesn't go overboard with stuff like this is BoJack Horseman. Now, I doubt I'll ever make a video on BoJack because I'm nowhere near good enough to articulate how great this show is and how it made me feel. And even if I did, there's already at least 100 great videos out there that have already done a better job than I ever could. So this is the most you'll get from me. But this show uses swearing perfectly. BoJack Horseman doesn't rely on profanity for shock or humor, but instead strategically places the F-bomb once a season within the context of the narrative, and when it finally comes out, it carries huge emotional weight and relevance to the show as a whole. That brings us back to Superbeasto. This movie really isn't that funny. I think I properly laughed during the movie at least like 5 times. The movie heavily relies on nudity, gross out humor, and violence, and it never works. There's an entire 23-second long scene of Dr. Satan jerking off, which I had to go back in time for this video, which you might think doesn't sound so bad, but pause the video and set a timer for 23 seconds and just sit there. Now imagine you're doing that but watching someone jerk their gherkin. Not fun and super awkward to watch. There's a lot of violence in this movie, which I'll give it, since this is an action movie, so you can't expect it not to have. But the sex and nudity in this movie is a little too much. There's gotta be a naked chick in this movie at least every 5 minutes. It gets to the point where there's so much you get bored of seeing tits, and that's really not a world I want to live in. There's a few gross out scenes in the movie too, but not that many. Rob Zombie said that the movie isn't like Ralph Bakshi's stuff, but more like if SpongeBob and Scooby-Doo were filthy, which, yeah, that sounds about right, but not in a good way. The Ralph Bakshi movies, well, at least the ones I've seen, there's a lot of nudity, sure, but it's balanced with everything else in the movie, so it doesn't really come across as bad as it does in this one. The movie pretty much is SpongeBob and Scooby-Doo if they were filthy too, but that doesn't really sound like a good thing to me. This movie really does feel like a child's idea of what an adult cartoon is. It's just a kid's show like SpongeBob with adult themes slapped onto it. This really doesn't feel like a Rob Zombie movie to me. Like, I'm pretty sure all of his live-action movies connected, so they'll have the same vibe and feel. You can just tell that Zombie made them. But with Superbeasto, it kind of feels like a Waco or Gwyn show, like Brickleberry or Farzad. Did anyone watch Farzad? I know I didn't. This movie feels like it's always trying to shock and disgust you rather than entertain you. I think that Rob Zombie is a really talented writer and director, and that this movie had a ton of potential to be able to do with the rest of his movies. I believe that with animation, you have the ability to do so much more and tell so many more stories than you could in live action. So this movie should have been great, but it's just a jumble of sex jokes and references. I really hope Zombie comes back to make another animated movie though, because like I said, he's good at what he does, and I feel like a lot of his ideas would translate perfectly into a cartoon. Dude's a crazy little freak. I know I've shit on this movie a lot, but I don't hate it. I think there's a lot of bad in this movie, but at the end of the day, it's still fun to watch. I can see myself watching this with friends and having a good time. Unless I didn't like it, because that's the worst feeling on earth, man. Like, have you ever put something on only for people to think it's ass? Truly a fate worse than death. But anyway, this movie's just dumb fun. So do I recommend it? Sure, but well, we warned you. Shit, I already used that joke. Ah well, doesn't matter. Also, does anyone else remember that really weird point in time where people either had Dr. Satan or Velvet as their profile picture? Okay, so that was my silly little Halloween video. Originally, I was going to do a ranking of cartoons that scared me as a kid, but I think I want to save it up for when I've got a bit more of an audience so more people can see how much of a pussy I was/am. Right now, I'm trying to decide whether or not to make a video for November, which would be about MTV's cartoon Good Vibes, or spending the rest of the year working on a Christmas video, which is going to be a ranking of all the American Dad Christmas specials. It honestly depends on how I'm feeling and how long it takes me for me to edit and upload this video. I've got a rough idea for all the videos I want to make for like half of next year, so now I don't really need to think of anything, I just need to write them. I plan on making videos at least once a month until I get better at this, so if any of you have any topics you think I should talk about, let me know in the comments. Okay, that's all I've got for this video. Make sure to like and subscribe and have a happy Halloween.